Welcome back. And now we're going to have a project lab discussion on rural and community-led initiatives by and for indigenous women. It's organized by the Policy Forum on Development, Women Engage for a Common Future, and Articulación Feminista Marcosur. We're going to understand why policy solutions and initiatives that are based on community rights and women's rights are so important. And this is especially true in the face of continued extraction projects and structural discrimination against indigenous peoples and indigenous and rural women. Inequalities are particularly seen in a lack of rights to land and other productive resources for women. Across the world, women consistently own less land than men and participate less in governance at all levels. So let's now start the lab debate on rural and community-led initiatives by and for indigenous women. The screen is yours, ladies. It's all up to you now. I'll be watching and listening very carefully.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today on rural and community-led initiatives by and for indigenous women. So achieving the aims set out in the European Green Deal and in the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda is of the utmost importance. This includes preserving and restoring biodiversity and forests in Europe and across the globe. Yet currently the EU is not meeting its environmental objectives, such as the targets under the Convention for Biological Diversity to halt biodiversity loss and deforestation. Indigenous and rural women and their communities across all regions are feeling the harsh impacts on their territories, forests, and livelihoods. As the moderator just said, policies, solutions, and initiatives that are based on community rights and women's rights are so important. And this is true, especially in the face of these extractivist projects and structural discrimination. For the last 5 years, we have been working in the Women 2030 program, funded by the EU, with women from local and indigenous communities. The Women 2030 program supports grassroots groups to stand up for their rights and protect the environment in line with the EU's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we will talk with indigenous and rural women about their priorities. And we will also delve into feminist perspectives and policy recommendations for the EU to tackle biodiversity and forest loss. Next slide, please. My name is Jeanette, and I am your moderator today, and I'm from the Global Forest Coalition. We are network partners of Women Engage for a Common Future, WECF, and together with Articulación Feminista Marcosur and the Policy Forum for Development, we are co-organizing this session. Sascha, GABIZON, who is the director of Women Engage for a Common Future, has joined us as well to support the moderation. So our three speakers today are leaders from women's rights organizations and feminist networks. Ernestine LEIKEKI is the board chair from the organization Cameroon Gender and Environment Watch. Dorothee LISENGA is the national coordinator of the Coalition of Women Leaders for the Environment and Development in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Lilian CELIBERTI is the co-founder of Cotidiano Mujer, which is a member of Articulación Feminista Marcosur and founder of the Daphnias Eco-Feminist Collective in Uruguay. Please note that Dorothee will speak in French and Lilian will speak in Spanish, so there will be simultaneous translation for our audience. So I would like to go directly to our speakers to tell us a bit more about their priorities and initiatives. Next slide, please. So our first question is for Ernestine. Ernestine, please share with us a little bit about you, where you work, and also what the struggles have been for the mountain forest communities in Bamenda Highlands, Cameroon.
My name is Ernestine LEIKEKI. I'm the board chair of Cameroon Gender and Environment Watch, CAMGEU, in the northwest region of Cameroon. I have a strong drive to take care of the environment. Akilung Aging Forest faces many challenges: bushfires, deforestation, overexploitation for lodging, encroachment by farmers, and poor soil conservation. And these are made worse by gender inequality, cultural barriers, and little knowledge about nature. For our communities, the forests are places of worship, and the forests provide us with water for our families, animals, and agriculture. When we destroy the forests, we destroy the basis of our livelihoods. I work to promote the integration of ecological and socio-economic rights of women in forest actions. At the last COP, I was one of the winners of the Gender Just Climate Solutions Awards. And since then, I am part of a network of award winners that are sharing their solutions with local groups and government through Women Engaged for a Common Future and the United Nations Climate Technology Center and Network, the CTCN. Today, I hope to share some solutions with our audience as well.
Thank you, Ernestine. And yes, indeed, we know that you are an award winner of the Gender Just Climate Solutions Awards at the Climate COP. So the EU also supports the vision of a green economy that is also inclusive and gender equal. And your projects, which were awarded, already seem to combine all these aspects. Could you tell us more about how?
Indeed, Jeanette, we combine both protection of the biodiversity and income for our women and their communities. At Cameroon, we believe that women are agents of change. And over the years, we have been working to strengthen women's capacity economically, socially, and in environmental protection. Through training on apiculture, jobs have been created, women's rights protected, and the forest is better conserved, and gender equality in forest governance reinforced. Women make up 51% of 300,000 people in the Kilum-Ijin forest area in the northwest region of Cameroon. In the Kilum-Ijin forest area, forest regeneration and bee farming has been a male-dominated sector. Our bees are especially large and scary. Women were not given the opportunity to participate in forest regeneration and income-generating opportunities, including honey value chain development. The interest of men in these activities had decreased, and our community forests were less well protected. Through Cameroon awareness raising, forest education, advocacy, and capacity building trainings, women and also youths have been integrated in nursery development, tree planting, bushfire prevention, bee farming, and the whole honey value chain. Women turn out to be excellent bee farmers. And importantly, we increase women participation in forest management institutions and decision-making. Honey from our forests is certified as a geographical indication product by African Intellectual Property.
Okay. All right. Sorry for the technical problems. Well, we can definitely go to our next speaker. Sascha, over to you to introduce the questions for our next speaker.
I hope, Dorothée, chère Dorothée, est-ce que vous pouvez m'entendre? Dear Dorothée, we hope you are with us, but I don't see you on the screen. Dorothée is our partner from DRC Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and working with the network of indigenous women working for sustainable development. Dorothée, can you hear me? Dorothée, tu nous entends? If not, we will take your audio recording. So I kindly ask the technical director to show us the slide, which you just showed, and to give us the audio recording for that, which has Dorothee's
je suis Dorothée LISENGA, coordonnatrice de la coalition des femmes leaders pour l'environnement et le développement durable, un réseau, soi-disant une ONG des droits congolais, et qui travaille, qui milite pour le travail de la femme et pour la protection des droits spécifiques de la femme. Nous sommes là sur toute l'étendue du territoire national et nous militons pour qu'on puisse reconnaître les droits des femmes et surtout sa participation dans la prise des décisions qui concernent les droits, la tenue foncière et forestière, aussi des ressources naturelles et le partage des bénéfices qui en découlent. Je suis moi-même une femme autochtone pygmée de mon État. Ce que vous voyez là-bas, la cartographie des terres par les femmes, parce que nous avons d'abord les coutumes rétrogrades qui ne donnent pas l'accès à la femme et à la terre. Et avec ça, nous avons milité pour qu'il y ait des dialogues entre frères et sœurs, entre les chefs coutumiers et les chefs de terre, les pouvoirs traditionnels et l'administration pour que la femme ait accès à la terre. C'est pourquoi il faut aller avec la cartographie des terres acquises coutumièrement par les femmes et ce qu'elles ont acquis pour qu'elles soient détentrices de la tenue foncière et forestière et puissent participer dans la prise des décisions.
Thank you very much, Dorothee. So Dorothee just gave us an explanation also of the photo, which we can see, where with the indigenous women of the Pygmy indigenous peoples, they have been making maps of the forest to show where women are using the land, even if they currently don't have the right to inherit or to own that land, and how they are ensuring to increase women's access and use of and land tenure of these lands they have traditionally been looking after and protecting, which is important for forest protection. So thank you, Dorothee, for that. And I give back to Jeanette for the next questions to our next speaker. Lilian, you won't have translation because we could not get the translation on board, but we hope if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Thank you, Sascha, and thank you, Dorothee. And Lilian, a question for you. Please introduce yourself, your work, and what the struggles have been for ecofeminists in Latin America.
Buenos días, es un gusto para mí. Quiero empezar saludando a las compañeras que me acompañan en este panel. Vivo en Uruguay, en un pequeño país entre Brasil y Argentina, dos grandes, y hace 35 años fundamos el colectivo cotidiano Mujer. Formo parte de la articulación feminista Marcosur, que surgió en 1999 y reúne a colectivos y organizaciones locales y redes nacionales con presencia activa en 10 países de América Latina. Uno de nuestros ejes de trabajo es desde el año 2005 los encuentros y debates interculturales con organizaciones y líderes indígenas y campesinas, con el objetivo de intercambiar saberes y aprender unas de las otras. De esos diálogos interculturales aprendimos a cuestionar la relación prescindente de la naturaleza que se establece en la vida urbana y a valorar la cosmovisión de pueblos indígenas y campesinos. Hemos promovido y trabajamos en ello, actualmente estamos organizando el próximo Foro Social Panamazónico que reúne a poblaciones de los 9 países que conforman la cuenca amazónica. La participación de las mujeres de las comunidades en ese espacio ha fortalecido su presencia y propuestas a partir de la organización del Tribunal de las Mujeres, que visibilizó sus liderazgos en defensa de las comunidades y territorios frente a las explotaciones mineras, la contaminación de ríos y arroyos, los monocultivos y agrotóxicos. Los diálogos y encuentros surgidos de estas experiencias entrelazan las voces de mujeres urbanas, indígenas, campesinas, que se expresan hoy en día en una campaña que se llama Nuestro cuerpo, nuestro territorio. Esa campaña articula la memoria del cuerpo disciplinado por el patriarcado, las violencias intergeneracionales y la relación con el territorio que conforma las identidades colectivas de las comunidades. Estas alianzas han contribuido a fortalecer la perspectiva ecofeminista que cuestiona una mirada antropocéntrica de la naturaleza considerada como un recurso utilitario para la sociedad humana. La recuperación de una perspectiva del buen vivir indígena permite pensar la sostenibilidad de la vida como eje para enfrentar el cambio climático, la pérdida de biodiversidad, las pandemias, la contaminación del agua y las desertificaciones.
Thank you, Lilian. Thank you for your contributions. Next slide, please. I see that Ernestine, our speaker, has returned. So Ernestine, I'll go straight to you. So we have just heard from Lilian a number of points, including about valuing indigenous worldviews, as well as women's leadership in the defense of communities and territories. So Ernestine, can you tell us a bit more from your perspective about how community forest governance, women's empowerment, and biodiversity protection are linked? Thanks, Ernestine.
Thank you, Jeanette. We at CAMJU believe that forest conservation cannot be sustainable without gender equality and livelihood improvement of community members. When women and men work together, biodiversity is better conserved. Working together promotes solidarity and peace in families and communities, which is needed in biodiversity conservation. The Cameroon law of 1994 provides for communities to apply for community ownership of their forest, but women have for a long time not been included in forest governance. Our approach reinstated joint community ownership by women and men of the forest. Poverty and unemployment have been a challenge in rural communities where natural resources are found. In the Kilum-Ijim forest area, CAMJU forest regeneration programs integrate both women and men. In forest management institutions and honey cooperatives, that's forest user groups, there are 3 women out of 6 executive members. During tree planting, women and men work together to transport and plant tree seedlings in the forest. More women have been trained in honey value chain development and supported with 2 beehives each to get started, whereas men receive 1 beehive. This has reduced the gender disparity in apiculture. Men and women work together in honey production and beeswax extraction. As a result, the forest is better conserved when men and women understand the importance of forests and various livelihood opportunities available for them. The most impressive result is that we have reduced bushfires to 0. We used to have bushfires every year. Now we have not had any bushfires anymore since 2018, thanks to our sustainable community forest programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernestine. And next slide, please. Sascha, would you like to introduce this question?
Yes, thank you, Jeanette. We are trying to get Dorothee back, but I'm afraid we will have to use her recording because we haven't been able to bring her in from Kinshasa due to the internet connections. But Dorothee, let me ask you the question. Can you tell us why you are campaigning to have traditional leaders in the indigenous communities change the customs to give indigenous women the right to inherit their family forests and land? And why is this beneficial, not only for the community, but also for the climate, for the forest, and for biodiversity? Let's take her recordings. Oh no, Dorothée is there. Dorothée, vous êtes là.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, je suis là. Est-ce que vous m'écoutez?
Oui, Dorothée, on est arrivé à la question 3 sur pourquoi vous voulez changer les lois traditionnelles. Donc, la question sur le travail que vous faites avec le chef traditionnel pour changer la loi d'héritage. Vas-y.
Bonjour, je m'excuse pour les caprices de la technique. Nous sommes là, nous avons au Congo des lois traditionnelles qui sont immuables et lesquelles la femme n'a pas accès à la propriété foncière et forestière et surtout aussi aux ressources naturelles et en ce qui concerne le partage des bénéfices. Et sur ces lois-là immuables et traditionnelles, nous voulons changer la face des choses avec des dialogues multi-acteurs avec les chefs coutumiers et les chefs traditionnels pour que la femme ait accès à la terre et surtout à la prise de décisions qui concernent ces ressources naturelles. Et avec ça, après les dialogues, les chefs de terre, les chefs coutumiers doivent signer des lettres d'engagement accordant maintenant garantissant l'accès de la femme à la tenue foncière et forestière, à l'accès aux ressources naturelles et au partage des bénéfices. Les résultats de tout cela sont envoyés au niveau des assemblées provinciales pour qu'on puisse édicter des petites lois qu'on appelle les édits provinciaux pour garantir maintenant l'accès à la femme à la tenue foncière et forestière. Voilà le travail que nous sommes en train de faire et dans bien des provinces, les choses ont changé et nous continuons les consultations avec CONAREF, la réforme foncière en cours en République démocratique du Congo, parce que le Congo est complexe et nous devons avoir la situation de chaque coin et la situation de chaque femme en main.
Merci Dorothée. Peut-être encore une autre question. Est-ce que vous pourriez nous donner un exemple? Could you maybe give also an example? I heard you talk about the trees where you have the caterpillars and why it is important that women are involved in decision-making, in the decisions around these type of products and productions in the forest. Donc, peut-être vous pouvez nous donner un exemple, Dorothée, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, un exemple, parce que, comme vous le savez, le Congo est le deuxième poumon mondial des forêts après l'Amazonie. Et nous avons une grande richesse de ce qu'on appelle les arbres à chenilles, qui produisent des chenilles. Et les chenilles sont des aliments qui sont très préférés et comestibles au niveau de la République démocratique du Congo et une source de l'économie aussi, de women empowerment pour les femmes congolaises. Et ces forêts-là, des arbres à chenilles sont attaqués à tout moment par la déforestation et ce sont les hommes qui sont à la base de ça. Et quand on déforeste ou on fait les clauses sociales des cahiers de charges de cette exploitation-là, la femme n'est pas dans la prise de décision. Et notre cheval de bataille est que la femme soit là pour que quand on prend les décisions, on délimite le nombre d'hectares et surtout on vise sur la restauration de ces paysages-là dégradés des arbres à chenilles.
Merci beaucoup Dorothée et je vais retourner vers Jeanette. I'm going back to Jeanette to take the next questions for Lilian. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothée, and thank you, Sascha. Next slide, please. So, second question to Lilian. Lilian, please also share with us your perspective on which policy measures incentives and analysis are needed to promote women's rights, in particular the rights of women who live in rural areas and are active in agriculture. Thanks, Lilian.
Thank you. Para responder esta pregunta, Jeanette, es necesario ubicar mejor la problemática que viven las mujeres rurales, indígenas y campesinas, porque representan tres situaciones socioculturales muy diversas en la región. A pesar de ello, es posible identificar problemáticas comunes entre las mujeres del medio rural, ya que enfrentan desigualdades estructurales que también comparten con el resto de las mujeres, también de las zonas urbanas, a pesar de que en los contextos rurales es mucho más grave. Podríamos señalar que tenemos escasas posibilidades de participación y liderazgo en la toma de decisiones, mantienen una acentuada sobrecarga de trabajo en las tareas de cuidado para la reproducción de la vida, y ello se da en el contexto de una escasa presencia de las políticas públicas estatales en los medios rurales, ya sea en educación, en salud, en vivienda o acceso a la justicia. En el marco de la pandemia por COVID-19, las mujeres de las áreas rurales y comunitarias han enfrentado altos niveles de precariedad económica que resulta de un incremento significativo en los niveles de pobreza, violencia de género, junto a una deficitaria atención médica en las comunidades. En particular, esto afecta a las poblaciones indígenas. La cadena de producción alimenticia también se ha visto impactada por la pandemia, y ello afecta particularmente a las productoras de alimento en pequeña escala, que es donde se ubican mayoritariamente las mujeres. Un reciente documento de trabajo elaborado por CEPAL en el 2020 señala que los pueblos indígenas, a pesar de que todas las orientaciones en la materia no solo coinciden en la necesidad de que los gobiernos visibilicen y respondan a los diferentes efectos de las crisis sociosanitarias sobre estos pueblos, sino también en el imperativo de prestar atención a las posibles repercusiones de las medidas de prevención, contención y mitigación en sus derechos colectivos, haciendo hincapié en que la protección de los territorios indígenas sea un componente central de los esfuerzos encaminados a proteger a pueblos indígenas de la propagación de la pandemia y a contribuir a su recuperación después de la crisis. Las mujeres rurales y campesinas siguen siendo y apareciendo como inactivas en las estadísticas nacionales. Por ello resulta fundamental el reconocimiento de sus tareas como productoras de alimentos a pequeña escala, en la preservación de la biodiversidad y la recuperación de prácticas agroecológicas que garanticen la soberanía alimentaria y nutricional de las Américas, que está amenazada hoy por la expansión del monocultivo sojero en el sur particularmente y la producción agroindustrial no sostenible. Las mujeres no son ignorantes, tienen otros saberes. En el contexto de degradación ambiental, el cambio climático y la agudización de la pobreza extrema en la región, el actual modelo de desarrollo de América Latina y el Caribe es insostenible y agudiza los problemas ambientales acercándonos al colapso. Esta afirmación es de un documento de CEPAL también del 2020 que se llama La tragedia ambiental de América Latina. La sociedad civil organizada genera en este marco un espacio de posibilidad para experimentar formas alternativas de participación y acción política basadas en una organización social horizontal y solidaria. Un ejemplo de ellos son los grupos en torno a modos colectivos y autogestionados de producción y consumo, como las redes agroecológicas y los mercados populares. Son prácticas que buscan construir alternativas que reconocen la interdependencia necesaria de la sociedad humana, pero también la ecodependencia con la naturaleza, asumiendo el cuidado como un eje central del sostenimiento de la vida humana y no humana. Un caso emblemático de esta lucha es el de Berta Cáceres, dirigente del pueblo lenca de Honduras, una de las líderes que se enfrentó al complejo hidroeléctrico Aguasarca en la cuenca del río Hualcarque, en Honduras. Esta presa restringía el acceso al agua a las comunidades locales lenca y ponía en riesgo su modo de vida tradicional y su supervivencia. Debido a la lucha del pueblo lenca, varios bancos internacionales se retiraron del proyecto. Sin embargo, en la madrugada del 2 de marzo del 2016, un grupo de sicarios la asesinaron e hirieron al activista mexicano Gustavo Castro, que se encontraba con ella. El crimen estuvo dirigido por militares y responsables de la DESA y la empresa constructora de la presa. Las mujeres juegan un rol central en la movilización comunitaria, como lo hizo Berta Cáceres a costa de su vida, junto a las otras y otros defensores socioambientales que defienden la tierra, los recursos naturales y los efectos del cambio climático en América Latina y el Caribe. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Lilian, for your important contributions. And also thank you to Ernestine and Dorothee so far for their contributions. I would like to provide some reflections of some of the insights that we've already heard, and I would like to formulate them as key messages and policy recommendations for the EU. So next slide, please. So first, it seems to me that one of our key messages from our speakers is that we need a rights-based approach. We need governments and corporations to respect the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities and their free, prior, and informed consent, as well as their territorial and land tenure rights and governance. We want laws and policies that recognize Indigenous peoples and local communities' conserved territories and areas, also known as ICCAs, territories of life, and sacred natural sites. And alongside this, we want to ensure women's participation in decision-making and governance and securing women's land tenure rights. In the last weeks, the Convention on Biological Diversity negotiations took place, and the EU plays a key role in this. We call on the EU to integrate a rights-based approach, as well as concrete targets in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and specific targets for community governance rights, and targets for women's rights and equal decision-making. Next slide, please. To address biodiversity and forest loss, we need the EU and all governments to renew and increase commitments to phase out perverse incentives that trigger biodiversity loss, such as the subsidies for the agro-industry that Lilian mentioned. We should also pay attention to the role of public and private investments in supporting biodiversity harmful projects. Rural and Indigenous sustainable food production can never compete against this multi-billion industry and their harmful activities, often subsidized by the EU, amongst others. As Lilian said, the EU ending harmful subsidies is essential to protecting women environmental defenders, such as Berta Cáceres. Next slide, please. Thirdly, we need to improve EU policies also inside Europe. The EU forest strategy and common agricultural policy exist to help large European industry, but this goes against the aims of the Green Deal and in the end negatively impacts communities and women worldwide. These EU forest and agricultural policies should be fully aligned with the Convention on Biodiversity, the aims of the EU Green Deal and the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. Only then can EU policies respect the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities and women in all their diversity. Next slide, please. Furthermore, community-based solutions, such as those that Ernestine, Dorothee, and Lilian told us about, are crucial. We need the EU to support community conservation initiatives, ICCAs, agroecology, small-scale family farming, and women's leadership in these local sustainable economies. The autonomy of women's rights and feminist organizations, as well as their increased engagement in policymaking, is critical. Our annual Gender Just Climate Solutions Awards at the Climate COP is an example of how we can do this. We need the EU to strengthen women's crucial contribution to agriculture and food sovereignty with tailor-made support to women smallholder farmers. But all of that support will only be a drop in a burning fire if we don't stop policies and subsidies that promote industrial agriculture, monoculture tree plantations, and biofuels that destroy forests and biodiversity. Next slide, please. Furthermore, gender analysis, gender disaggregated data, and gender budgeting are hugely important. We need governments to commit to mandatory budgets for gender activities in the CBD and national biodiversity plans and programs too. Lastly, the EU has launched its third gender action plan for its international partnerships. We need to see EU delegations engaging with Indigenous and rural women's organizations in implementing the gender action plan. So come and reach out to us because as we have already seen today, the Ernestines and the Dorothees and the Lilians have the expertise you need. Next slide, please. I would also like to give the last word to our speakers. So Ernestine, I hope you're there. Please share with us your concluding remarks and also with a reflection on the different and shared perspectives between you and the other speakers. Thank you, Ernestine. Okay, that's all right. Thank you. I hope Ernestine will rejoin us. Perhaps we can ask Dorothee to continue. Sascha, would you like to take over?
Sure. Chère Dorothée, j'espère que vous nous entendez. Donc, on voudrait bien avoir votre réflexion et conclusion sur nos discussions, s'il vous plaît. Please give us your conclusions.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Nous voulons d'abord insister sur les questions qui concernent les gens, c'est-à-dire la participation de la femme dans la prise de décision qui concerne notre environnement, concernant la conservation, l'exploitation durable des ressources naturelles, la participation de la femme dans la prise de décision et surtout les questions qui concernent le partage des bénéfices. En ce qui concerne l'exploitation de la durable et de la forêt.
Je suis désolée, Dorothée. J'ai l'impression que la connexion n'est pas très bonne. Jeanette, did you also not have a good connection, yeah?
No, I didn't.
No.
Perhaps, Sascha, you could say a bit?
Yeah, so maybe, Dorothée, if you don't mind, because we can't hear you very well, I'll just try to summarize the points you wanted to make. Because we saw the picture of you with the ministers in your government, and we see that it's just you and another of your colleagues and many male partners, not partners, ministers and state secretaries, including the Minister of Environment of the previous government. And so you were telling us that you would like to see a more women leadership and that women's decisions are really crucial. So yeah, it's I think one of the key lessons we have to take with us is that you are looking forward to increasing women's participations in decision-making at the local level in your communities, but also at the federal level in the governments, because it's only then that we can take the necessary political decisions to protect the forest and the animals and the biodiversity in your forest for the next generations. Do you want, let's try again. You're back. Let's see if you can finalize yourself, maybe with your last points. Dorothée, on essaie de nouveau, vas-y.
Oui, nous voulons, en conclusion, nous voulons que la femme participe activement dans la prise de décisions qui concernent notre environnement. Dans la prise de décisions qui concernent les clauses sociales, les cahiers de charges de l'exploitation forestière, les questions de conservation, de l'exploitation durable, de partage des bénéfices qui en découlent de nos ressources naturelles.
I'm so sorry, Dorothée. The connection is not good enough. So I'm giving it back to Jeanette. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see, Ernestine, you're back. Perhaps, great to have you. Perhaps I can go to you, Ernestine. Maybe you can share with us your concluding remarks with a reflection on the different and shared perspectives that you have heard today from Dorothee and Lilian. Thanks, Ernestine.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and sorry for my internet. I will conclude by saying that indigenous and local women have been the most disadvantaged. It is therefore that their rights need to be specifically promoted and respected. Their rights to the forest, their rights to land, and equal sharing in benefits from natural resources. Sustainable ecosystem restoration and conservation requires a more holistic approach, and women are key actors. We call on the European Union and various stakeholders to support policies and funding for local communities and indigenous peoples' governance over their forests through sustainable solutions in which women have equal rights in decision-making. I will be glad to share our solutions and thank Dorothee and Lilian for sharing theirs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ernestine, for your contributions. Lilian, please share with us your concluding remarks with a reflection on the different and shared perspectives between you and the other speakers. Thank you, Lilian.
Bueno, compartiendo lo expresado por Dorothee y también por Ernestine, me gustaría enfatizar en esta idea de que las mujeres campesinas e indígenas forman parte de los territorios, no podemos disociar. Por lo tanto, uno de los ejes centrales para pensar las soluciones y las medidas es garantizar el derecho a los territorios, a la tierra, al agua, a los bosques, a la pesca, a las tierras de pastoreo, etc. En segundo lugar, es necesario que se ratifique y respete la aplicación integral del Convenio 169 de la OIT y de la Declaración sobre los Derechos del Campesinado y que se establezcan mecanismos de consulta frente a cualquier tipo de proyecto que involucre los derechos territoriales de las comunidades. Es necesario también restaurar su derecho a conservar, sembrar, intercambiar, vender semillas de manera irrestricta, reconociendo la ancestralidad de esas prácticas y no dejándose captar por las patentes que le roban, digamos, esa ancestralidad a los pueblos campesinos e indígenas. Promover también la agroforestería ecológica, la agricultura familiar campesina y la gestión comunitaria de la selva y los bosques para la seguridad y la soberanía alimentaria. Recordemos que la agricultura que hemos conocido en milenios podría enfrentar condiciones climáticas que el mundo no ha vivido y que cambian radicalmente las formas de producir y por lo tanto tenemos que tener como eje central el cuidado. Eliminar las regulaciones que obstaculizan el desarrollo de los mercados locales y la diversidad. Establecer políticas que favorezcan la participación de las mujeres, el reconocimiento de las tareas de cuidado y su acceso a la seguridad social. Es necesario instituir el comercio justo, determinado por políticas propuestas por los campesinos y campesinas y comunidades originarias. Establecer salarios y condiciones laborales justos para los y las trabajadoras agrícolas y de la alimentación, que son otro sector asalariado, garantizando sus derechos también de agremiación y defensa de derechos. Frenar la destrucción amazónica y su deforestación. Promover la soberanía energética, hídrica y alimentaria en los territorios como expresión de la gestión comunitaria de ese territorio y particularmente con la participación activa de las mujeres y las juventudes. Y combatir la criminalización de activistas y defensoras socioambientales, y este es un punto central en América Latina. Muchísimas gracias y un saludo muy grande a todas desde América Latina para África y para donde cada uno de ustedes esté en Europa.
Thank you so much, Lilian. I believe we are done with our event today. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for their fantastic contributions. I would also like to thank our organizers, our translators, and our audience. We hope that we can jointly take the necessary action to protect community rights and women's rights and the biodiversity and territories that women depend on, such as in the communities that Dorothee, Ernestine, and Lilian work with. So that's all for our session today. So thank you for joining. Thank you again, Lilian, Dorothee, and Ernestine, and goodbye.
Thank you, Jeanette and Sascha. Wow, that was such an amazing and informative panel on rural and community-led initiatives for and by indigenous women. I have to say, I learned so much, and I really can't have some 1-2 takeaways. Just to say, fantastic panelists from Africa and Latin America sharing their challenges, but also their really feisty way of responding to these challenges. A lot of engagement also from you with your questions and your queries to the panelists and to our moderators. So just a few takeaways, really. We know by now that women are agents of change, and indigenous women are also very formidable agents of change. And we learned once again about the importance of land rights, the critical role of forest management, and how women, indigenous women, are playing such a positive and constructive role in forest management and forest conservation. And gender equality is so important, we heard it during the panel, in forest governance. We learned a thing or two about farming, bee farming, and I also learned something that I didn't really know, that caterpillars are a source of nutrition, especially for babies. And then as we are in Brussels, and this is European Development Days 2021, a lot of focus on the EU and the EU Green Deal, its global impact, and a plea from our panelists there that EU forest and agricultural policies should be fully aligned with the conservation and the Convention on Biodiversity and the aims of the EU Green Deal. And the EU should put women's rights right on the top. We're going to take a very short break, and then I'm going to be interviewing the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, on their brainstorming that they've been holding while we've been having these different panels. And this brainstorming has been about food policies for indigenous people. So see you back in a second or two.